am Rachel Matthews, 32 years old, and until recently I was a dedicated marketing specialist at Horizon Media. For 5 years, I poured my heart and soul into that company, often working 60-hour weeks, while my colleague Brian Thompson barely managed the minimum. I was certain the senior marketing director position would be mine. Everyone said so. Then came the announcement that shattered my world and taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. Before I tell you how my world collapsed, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe if you want more stories about workplace justice that will make your jaw drop. I still remember the day I walked into Horizon Media's glass and steel headquarters for my interview with my MBA from the University of Michigan fresh in hand, and dreams bigger than the Chicago skyline. I was ready to conquer the marketing world. The interview went brilliantly, and when they offered me an entry-level marketing coordinator position, I accepted on the spot. Despite the modest salary, I knew this company had potential for growth, and I was determined to climb the ladder. From day one, I established myself as someone management could count on. While other new hires were watching the clock for quitting time, I was the first one in and the last one out. My desk lamp was often the only one still illuminating our office floor, long after everyone else had gone home. Not because I was inefficient, but because I wanted to deliver excellence in everything I touched. By my second year, I had been promoted to marketing specialist. My campaigns consistently outperformed projections. The Riverside Hotel chain campaign I developed increased their bookings by 37% in just one quarter. The Nutri-Life rebrand I spearheaded helped them capture an entirely new demographic, boosting their sales by over 40%. These were not just good results, they were exceptional, and the numbers proved it. Sandra Miller, the senior marketing director and my mentor, took notice early on. A formidable woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the sharpest mind I had ever encountered. She began inviting me to client meetings that would normally be reserved for more senior staff. "You have raw talent, Rachel," she told me over coffee one morning, "but more importantly, you have work ethic and integrity. That combination is rare and valuable." Sandra became my guide through the corporate landscape, teaching me not just about marketing strategies, but about navigating office politics. When she announced her retirement plans, she pulled me aside. "I have spoken to David about you," she said, referring to David Wilson, our marketing department head. "The senior director position will open when I leave. You should apply. You are ready." For the next 3 months, I prepared meticulously. I created a comprehensive portfolio, showcasing my best campaigns. I took an advanced course in digital marketing strategies to ensure my skills were cutting edge. I practiced my presentation skills at Toastmasters every Tuesday night, and I even bought books on leadership and management, highlighting and annotating key passages during my morning commute. The interview with David went even better than I had hoped. He seemed genuinely impressed with my portfolio and the 5-year growth strategy one had prepared specifically for the interview. "This is excellent work, Rachel," he said, leafing through my presentation. "Very thorough, very forward-thinking." When I left his office, my colleagues Jessica Parker and Thomas Reynolds were waiting eagerly. "How did it go?" Jessica asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "I think it went really well," I replied, trying to contain my own optimism. "Please," Thomas scoffed good-naturedly. "Everyone knows the job is already yours. David would be insane to pick anyone else." That night, I went shopping for the perfect outfit to wear on announcement day. I settled on a navy blue suit that projected confidence and professionalism. As I stood in front of the mirror at the boutique, I allowed myself to imagine hearing David say the words, "Our new senior marketing director is Rachel Matthews." I was ready. I had earned this. Brian Thompson joined Horizon Media about a year after I did. While I had earned my position through hard work and proven results, Brian seemed to have been hired primarily for his charisma and connections. The son of a well-known advertising executive, Brian had an air of entitlement that was immediately apparent from his first day. Brian established a pattern of doing the absolute minimum required. He regularly arrived at 9:30 for our 8:30 start time, always armed with elaborate excuses involving traffic or train delays, despite living closer to the office than most of us. He took extended lunch breaks, often returning with a lingering scent of alcohol, and he was typically the first one out the door at 5 o'clock sharp. Working hard or hardly working became his personal catchphrase, delivered with a wink that somehow charmed management, while irritating everyone who actually carried his slack. What Brian lacked in work ethic, however, he made up for in political savvy. He had an uncanny ability to appear whenever the executive team was around, materializing with coffee and conversation just as the chief executive officer walked through. He remembered personal details about everyone in management, asking about their children's soccer games or their wives' charity events. He laughed at all of David's jokes, no matter how stale, and always had sports statistics ready for the Monday morning discussions about weekend games. Initially, I did not consider Brian competition. While we held the same title of marketing specialist, we operated in different realms. I was focused on delivering results. He was focused on delivering compliments. The first time I had to cover for Brian was 6 months after he started. We were partnered on the Franklin Sports account, with Brian responsible for the social media strategy, while I handled traditional media. The day before our presentation, Brian casually mentioned he might need some help polishing his section. What I discovered was that he had not even started. No strategy document, no content calendar, not even basic research on the client's existing social presence. I stayed until midnight, creating a comprehensive social media plan from scratch, which Brian then presented as his own work, making direct eye contact with me as he took credit for specific ideas I had developed hours earlier. This became a pattern. For the Lakeside Mall campaign, Brian was supposed to conduct customer surveys and compile the data. When the deadline approached with no updates from him, I discreetly completed the work myself, rather than risk the project's failure. For the Green Life Organics launch, Brian was assigned the competitive analysis, but produced 3 superficial paragraphs. I rewrote it entirely, expanding it to 15 pages of detailed insights. Each time, I told myself I was being a team player, that the work reflected on all of us, that eventually merit would be recognized. The first real warning sign came 3 weeks before Sandra's retirement. I was grabbing lunch at the cafe across from our building, when I spotted Brian and David sitting in a corner booth, deep in conversation. This was not unusual on its own, but what caught my attention was the intensity of their discussion, and the way David clapped Brian on the shoulder as they left, a gesture of familiarity I had never seen him extend to any other employee. I saw Brian and David having lunch today. I mentioned casually to Sandra the next morning. David meets with lots of team members, she reassured me, and trust me, he knows exactly who does the real work around here. Still, something felt off. In the following days, I noticed small changes. Brian began attending meetings he had previously skipped. He started keeping regular hours, arriving promptly at 8:30. Most concerning, he began asking detailed questions about my projects. Just trying to learn from the best, he said, with that trademark smile. When I questioned his sudden interest, a week before the promotion announcement, the entire marketing department went to dinner at Lame One, an upscale French restaurant downtown. The evening was meant to be a celebration of Sandra's career, but Brian seemed unusually jubilant, ordering expensive champagne and making repeated toasts. As the night wound down, I overheard him telling Jessica, "Big change is coming, you will see." That night, I barely slept. For the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into my mind. I tried to dismiss it, reminding myself of all the reasons I deserved the promotion. But Brian's confidence had planted a seed of uncertainty that would soon grow into something much darker. The morning of the announcement, I arrived at the office at 7:15, earlier than usual. I wanted time to compose myself, to review my notes for the first senior team meeting, where I would present my vision for the department. My navy blue suit felt powerful, professional. I had even treated myself to a blowout at the salon the evening before. Our conference room filled quickly. Sandra sat near the front, giving me an encouraging smile. Brian arrived last, naturally, wearing a new suit I had not seen before. He caught my eye and gave me a strange smile that did not quite reach his eyes. At exactly 9 o'clock, David entered the room. The chief executive officer, Margaret Jackson, followed behind him, which was not part of the plan as far as I knew. My stomach tightened. Executive presence usually meant bigger announcements. Good morning, everyone, David began, his voice carrying across the now silent room. As you all know, today marks a significant transition for our team. After 15 incredible years, we are saying goodbye to Sandra Miller as our Senior Marketing Director. Applause filled the room, as Sandra nodded graciously. Sandra leaves behind enormous shoes to fill, David continued. We conducted an extensive review of internal candidates, looking for someone who embodies the leadership qualities, creative thinking, and cultural fit that Horizon Media values. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I subtly straightened my posture, ready to stand when my name was called. I am delighted to announce that our new Senior Marketing Director will be, David paused for dramatic effect, Brian Thompson. The room erupted in applause again, but it sounded distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. My vision narrowed to a pinpoint, focused on David's face, searching for some sign that this was a mistake, but his broad smile confirmed the unthinkable reality. Brian rose, straightening his tie, and made his way to the front of the room. I felt frozen, my body refusing to process what my mind already knew. Somehow, I managed to force my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile, even as my chest constricted painfully. Thank you, David, Margaret, Brian began, his voice smooth as silk. I am honored and humbled by this opportunity. I have learned so much from everyone in this room, especially Sandra. He turned toward me. And Rachel, I could not have done this without you. Your dedication has been an inspiration. The audacity of his statement nearly broke my composure. Could not have done this without me. He had done almost nothing, yet here he stood, being rewarded for work I had completed, for late nights I had endured, for ideas I had generated. As the meeting concluded, colleagues approached to congratulate Brian. A few stopped by my desk with puzzled expressions, murmuring quietly that they had been certain the position would be mine. I maintained my professional mask, thanking them for their support, while assuring them I was just fine. The moment the last well-wisher left, I made a beeline for the restroom, locking myself in the furthest stall. Only then did I allow the tears to fall, silent and hot against my cheeks. Questions raced through my mind. What had I done wrong? What did Brian have that I did not? How could years of proven excellence lose out to charm and connections? After composing myself, I returned to find Sandra waiting at my desk, her face a mixture of shock and indignation. This is not right, she said quietly. Everyone knows you deserve that position. Apparently not everyone, I replied, attempting a weak smile. I am going to speak with David, Sandra insisted. This decision makes no sense. Please do not, I said quickly. I need to understand this myself first. But thank you, Sandra. It means a lot that you believe in me. As she walked away, I opened my computer and tried to focus on work, but the words blurred before my eyes. The promotion I had worked toward for years, the recognition I had earned through countless late nights and successful campaigns, had been handed to someone else, someone who had never demonstrated even a fraction of my commitment or capability. The betrayal cut deep, but I had no idea that this was merely the beginning of a situation that would grow increasingly unbearable. The following Monday, I requested a meeting with David. I needed feedback, needed to understand where I had fallen short. Professional development, I told myself, a learning opportunity. In reality, I was searching for any explanation that might make sense of the incomprehensible. David's assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute slot between meetings, which was telling in itself. When I entered his office, David barely looked up from his computer. Rachel, have a seat. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath, determined to maintain my professionalism. I wanted to get your feedback on my candidacy for the senior director position. I would appreciate understanding where I fell short, so I can focus my development efforts. David finally looked at me, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. You are an excellent performer, Rachel. Your technical skills are strong. I waited for more, but he seemed to consider this adequate feedback. I understand that, I pressed gently, but I would like to know specifically why Brian was selected instead. What qualities or skills did he demonstrate that made him a better fit? David's expression tightened slightly. It came down to cultural fit and leadership qualities. Brian has a natural ability to connect with people at all levels. He thinks big picture. The executive team felt he was ready, to step into a more strategic role. Every word felt like a slap. Cultural fit. I had built relationships throughout the company. Leadership qualities. I had successfully led multiple teams and mentored junior staff. Big picture thinking. My 5-year strategy had been praised by David himself. I managed and my track record of successful campaigns. My consistently positive client feedback. My detailed growth strategy presentation. These were not factors. Of course they were considered, David said dismissively. This was not an easy decision, Rachel, but we need to move forward now. Brian will be counting on your support during this transition. As I left David's office, I spotted Brian in the conference room presenting to the creative team. Through the glass wall, I could see him gesturing to slides that looked eerily familiar. With a sinking feeling, I realized he was using my strategic framework. The very one I had developed for my interview. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Brian would call me into his new corner office, ask for my input on projects, then present my ideas as his own in executive meetings. I was no longer invited to attend. Work I had initiated was suddenly collaborative, with Brian's name listed first on all documentation. The workload shifted as well. Brian began delegating his responsibilities to me, claiming he needed to focus on higher-level strategic initiatives. In practice, this meant I was now doing my job in half of his, while he attended long lunches with executives and spent hours closed in his office on personal calls. "Can you just clean up this presentation for tomorrow's client meeting?" became his standard request at 4:45. Cleanup invariably meant completely rebuilding inadequate work, or creating entire sections from scratch. My colleagues saw what was happening. Jessica stopped by my desk one evening, as I was finishing a report Brian had dumped on me an hour before deadline. "This is not right, Rachel," she said quietly. "Everyone knows you are doing all the work, while he takes the credit." "What can I do?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "Document everything," suggested Thomas, who had joined us. "Every email, every request, every instance of him taking credit. You never know when you might need it." I took their advice, creating a detailed log of all the work I completed that Brian claimed as his own. I saved emails, screenshots, earlier versions of documents with my original ideas. It became a second job, this careful documentation of injustice. Sandra called me regularly after her retirement, and during one particularly difficult week, she suggested I meet with her for dinner. "You look exhausted," she said when I arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes late, after finishing a project Brian had forgotten about. "I am fine," I insisted, though we both knew it was not true. Dark circles had taken permanent residence under my eyes. I had lost weight, my suits hanging loose where they once fit perfectly. "No, you are not," Sandra said firmly, "and you need to consider whether this situation is sustainable." The truth was, it was not just my professional life suffering. My personal life had begun to unravel as well. I had canceled dinner plans with my boyfriend Mike 3 times in the past month. When we did see each other, I was distracted, mentally cataloging all the tasks waiting for me at the office. "You are not really here," Mike had said during our last date. "You have not been really here in months." He was right. I was physically present, but mentally trapped in an endless cycle of work, resentment, and increasing anxiety. I had started waking at 3 o'clock, mind racing with all the ways I was being taken advantage of, but unable to see a way out. The situation reached a breaking point, 6 weeks after Brian's promotion. We were preparing for a major presentation to Nutrilife, one of our biggest clients. I had spent weeks researching market trends, developing creative concepts, and building comprehensive slides. Brian had contributed exactly nothing, despite being officially in charge of the account. The morning of the presentation, Brian asked me to walk him through all the material, just to make sure we are aligned. For 2 hours, I explained every slide, every strategy point, every data insight. He nodded, asked a few questions, then thanked me for my thoroughness. "Great job putting this together," he said, "but I will handle the actual presentation. The client is expecting to hear from the senior director." I sat silently at the back of the room, as Brian presented my work word for word. When the Nutrilife chief executive officer specifically praised the competitive analysis section, saying it was the most insightful market breakdown they had seen, Brian smiled broadly. Thank you. I really focused on digging deeper than the surface numbers on that section. I had stayed until 2 a.m., 3 nights in a row, creating that analysis. After the meeting, as the clients filed out, I overheard the Nutrilife marketing manager say to Brian, "Your team is lucky to have such a visionary leader." Later that afternoon, I was returning from the break room when I heard Brian's voice from David's office door slightly ajar. "Between us, Rachel has been struggling with the increased responsibilities. I have had to redo a lot of her work lately. Might be time to consider whether she is the right fit for her current role." The mug of coffee slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Hot liquid splashed my legs, but I barely felt it. Brian was not only stealing my work, he was actively undermining me. That night after everyone had left, I sat alone in the darkened office. Sandra's retirement had removed my last ally. The situation was not going to improve. Brian would continue taking credit for my work, while simultaneously diminishing my value to the company. Eventually, he might even succeed in having me removed or demoted. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider leaving. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. I had given 5 years of my life to Horizon Media. My identity was thoroughly entangled with my role there. Who would I be without this job? I opened my laptop and began researching employment law and company policies. I needed to understand my options. Later that week, I met with my friend Emily, a labor attorney, for confidential advice. "Based on what you have described, you have grounds for a complaint," she explained, "but corporate disputes are messy even when you are in the right. Have you considered simply moving on?" I had, but something in me resisted the idea of quietly walking away while Brian continued his charade. That weekend, Mike and I went for a long walk along the lakefront. I told him everything, all the frustration and anger I had been bottling up for months. "You know what I think," he said after listening patiently. "I think you should start your own agency. You are brilliant at what you do, Rachel. Why waste that talent making someone else look good?" The idea took root, growing stronger each day. I began researching what it would take to launch my own marketing consultancy. I updated my portfolio with campaigns I could legally showcase. I made discreet inquiries to contacts who might become future clients, and I drafted my resignation letter, revising it multiple times until it was perfect, professional, concise, with no hint of the turmoil that had prompted it. Except for one crucial final paragraph that would change everything. The client presentation debacle marked a definitive turning point. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. A realization that no amount of hard work or excellence would ever be fairly recognized in an environment where politics trumped performance. Still, I was not ready to make any rash decisions. I needed to be strategic, just as I had been with every marketing campaign I had ever developed. The next morning I arrived early as usual. The office was quiet, with only the cleaning staff present. I settled at my desk and began making a detailed list of pros and cons for staying versus leaving. Under staying, I struggled to list even 3 points. Under leaving, my pen moved rapidly across the page. Around 10 a.m., Sandra called. Though retired, she remained well connected with former colleagues and industry contacts. "Rachel, I just heard something you should know," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "A friend on the board mentioned that David has been praising Brian's leadership, specifically citing the Nutrilife presentation as evidence of his transformative impact on the department." I gripped the phone tighter. "The presentation I created entirely." "Exactly," Sandra confirmed, "and there is more. They are discussing a substantial bonus for Brian based on the department's performance this quarter. The performance that was largely due to my campaigns, my strategies, my late nights. There is something else," Sandra continued after a pause. "I am not supposed to know this yet, but I am being honored at the Marketing Excellence Awards next month. I have insisted you be my guest. You deserve to be in that room, Rachel, surrounded by people who recognize true talent." After we hung up, I sat motionless at my desk. The award ceremony would put me in the same room with the industry's most influential leaders, potential clients, and possibly future employers or potential investors in a new venture. The seed Mike had planted about starting my own agency suddenly felt less like a fantasy and more like a viable escape route. That afternoon, Brian called me into his office. A client was unhappy with a campaign concept his team had presented, and he needed a completely new approach by morning. I would do it myself, he said, not even attempting to sound sincere, but I have dinner with David and the executive team tonight. Real shame about the timing. As I gathered the files, he added casually, "Oh, and I will need you to come in this weekend to prepare for the quarterly review. I want to present some fresh ideas to the board." I nodded automatically, then paused at the door. "Brian, just out of curiosity, do you ever feel bad about taking credit for other people's work?" He looked up, genuinely surprised by the question. "That is business, Rachel. Everyone does it. If you were smarter about office politics, maybe you would be the one with the corner office." He shrugged. "No hard feelings though, you are great at the execution stuff." The execution stuff. As if strategy, creativity, and innovation were somehow lesser skills than schmoozing executives. I returned to my desk and opened my personal email, clicking on a message I had received earlier from a former client who had started her own company. She was looking for marketing support and had reached out to see if I could recommend anyone. Or better yet, she had written, "If you ever decide to leave Horizon, I would hire you in a heartbeat." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I opened a new document and began drafting a business plan for Matthew's marketing consultancy. That evening, I stayed late completing Brian's urgent project, but something had changed. I was no longer doing it for approval or recognition. I was doing it as the final act in a chapter that was about to close. When I arrived home after 10 p.m., Mike was waiting with takeout and a sympathetic ear. I showed him the business plan I had started. "This is really good, Rachel," he said, reviewing my notes. "You have got the expertise, the client relationships, the creative vision. What is stopping you?" "Fear," I admitted. "What if I fail?" "What if you fly?" he countered. "And honestly, how much worse would failing on your own terms be compared to what you are experiencing now?" He had a point. The following day, I contacted Emily again for legal advice about starting my own agency. I needed to understand my non-compete obligations and client solicitation restrictions. As it turned out, Horizon's employment contract had several vulnerabilities a good lawyer could work with. I also scheduled a meeting with a small business advisor at my bank to discuss financing options. Between my savings and a potential small business loan, I could sustain myself for at least 6 months while building a client base. Each step I took toward independence lightened the weight I had been carrying. Each concrete plan made leaving seem less frightening and more exciting. The final catalyst came when Sandra forwarded me an industry newsletter featuring an interview with Brian. He was quoted extensively about the innovative strategy behind the NutriLife campaign, my strategy, described in my words, without a single mention of my contribution. That night I finalized my resignation letter. The main body was professional and benign, expressing gratitude for the opportunities one had at Horizon, and wishing the company continued success. It was the kind of resignation letter that burned no bridges, and would generate no suspicion. But the final paragraph was different. The final paragraph contained the truth, carefully documented and impossible to dismiss. The final paragraph would ensure that while I might be leaving, justice would remain. I slept better that night than I had in months, secure in my decision, and ready for whatever came next. I chose a Tuesday for my resignation. Mondays were always chaotic, and I wanted David's full attention. I arrived at the office dressed in one of my best suits, a sleek black ensemble that always gave me confidence. I brought a small box for my personal items, though I planned to collect most of them later after the dust had settled. My resignation letter was printed on high-quality paper and sealed in an envelope. The regular letter was brief and professional. The attachment, however, contained meticulously organized evidence. Screenshots of emails where Brian directly asked me to complete his assigned work, side-by-side comparisons of my original documents and his revised versions that were identical except for the name change. Testimonials from clients specifically praising elements I had created. Time-stamped records showing I was in the office working late while Brian was out socializing with executives. At precisely 10 a.m., I knocked on David's door. "Rachel, come in," he said, barely glancing up from his computer. "Make it quick though. I have a call with the Chicago office in 15 minutes. I remained standing, placing the envelope on his desk. "This is my formal resignation. I will be leaving Horizon Media effective 2 weeks from today. That got his attention. David looked up, his expression more annoyed than concerned. Resignation. Is this about the promotion? Because that is water under the bridge now, Rachel. We need to move forward as a team. It is about several things, I replied evenly, all of which are outlined in my letter. David opened the envelope, skimming the main letter with a dismissive expression. He actually chuckled, a short condescending sound that made my spine stiffen. Well, if you feel you need to move on, we certainly will not stand in your way. Though I think you are making a hasty decision, Brian speaks highly of your execution skills. There it was again, execution skills, as if I were merely an implementation drone rather than the strategic mind behind our most successful campaigns. There is an attachment you should review as well, I said quietly. David flipped to the next page, then the next, his expression transforming from casual dismissal to confusion, to something approaching alarm. He flipped through the documentation more rapidly now, his face gradually draining of color as he absorbed the evidence before him. When he reached the final page, which stated that copies of all documentation had been forwarded to the Board of Directors and the Human Resources Department, he looked up sharply. Is this some kind of joke? He demanded, his voice strained. I shook my head. No joke, just facts. Everything in that file is true and verifiable. David stood abruptly. This is completely inappropriate. You cannot just send accusations like this to the board without going through proper channels. Actually, I can, I replied calmly. The company whistleblower policy specifically states that employees may report ethical concerns directly to the board if they involve senior management. As department head, you qualify as senior management. He began pacing behind his desk. This is about the promotion, is it not? You are angry you did not get the job, so you are trying to sabotage Brian's position. That is petty and unprofessional, Rachel. This is about integrity, I corrected him. About recognizing the actual work behind the results Horizon claims to value. If the company truly believes in meritocracy, they should know who is really responsible for the successes being attributed to others. David changed tactics, his tone suddenly conciliatory. Look, Rachel, let us discuss this reasonably. What would it take for you to reconsider? A promotion? A raise? Your own office? Nothing. I said simply, my decision is made. At least withdraw the complaint to the board, he pressed. We can handle this internally. There is no need to escalate matters. I met his gaze steadily. The board already has the documentation. So does HR. This is not the negotiation, David. It is a goodbye. You realize this burns bridges, he said, his voice hardening again. I have connections throughout this industry. This could affect your future opportunities. I had anticipated this threat. I am not concerned. The marketing community is smaller than you think, and word travels fast about who really does the work. Sandra has already introduced me to half the creative directors in Chicago. David's face flushed at the mention of Sandra. He had never liked her direct approach, her insistence on recognizing genuine talent over political maneuvering. 2 weeks' notice is standard, I continued, but I am prepared to leave immediately if you prefer. I have documented all my current projects and created transition notes. He stared at me for a long moment, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he said, clear out your desk today. We will pay the 2 weeks, but I want you gone by noon. I nodded, having expected this reaction. I will send an email to the team letting them know. No, David snapped. I will handle communications about your departure. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Board secretary just walked into HR, looking serious. What did you do? I smiled faintly as I closed David's door behind me. The wheels were already in motion. At my desk, I quickly gathered my personal items while responding to confused messages from colleagues who had seen me enter David's office with an envelope and exit looking unusually serene. Leaving for a new opportunity, I wrote in response to their questions, details coming soon. Brian appeared at my desk as I was unplugging my personal phone charger. Heard a rumor you are quitting, he said, looking more curious than concerned. Finally realized you are not cut out for the big leagues. I regarded him calmly. Actually, Brian, I have simply decided I deserve better than watching someone else take credit for my work. By the way, you might want to prepare for your meeting with the board this afternoon. I hear they have some interesting questions about the NutriLife campaign. His smug expression faltered. What are you talking about? You will find out soon enough, I replied, closing my box of belongings. Good luck explaining all those brilliant strategies you developed. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard my name called. Thomas and Jessica were hurrying toward me, faces full of questions. Is it true, Jessica asked, you are really leaving? It is time for a new chapter, I confirmed. But where are you going? Thomas pressed. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I am going to build something of my own, something where integrity and actual results matter. Their expressions shifted from confusion to something like admiration. Jessica pulled me into a quick hug. Good for you, seriously, this place does not deserve you. As the elevator doors closed, my phone lit up with more messages from colleagues. News traveled fast. By the time I reached the lobby, I had received 12 texts including one from Sandra. Board chairman just called me. They are launching a full investigation, call me. As I stepped outside, the spring air felt fresh and full of possibility. I had taken control of my narrative. I had stood up for my worth. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, without compromising my integrity. I hailed a taxi, giving the driver my home address. As we pulled away from the Horizon Media building, I did not look back. The first week after leaving Horizon was surprisingly difficult. After 5 years of structured days and clear objectives, the sudden freedom felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I alternated between bursts of productive energy, developing my business plan and website, and moments of paralyzing doubt. Had I made a catastrophic mistake? Would David's industry connections blacklist me? Would I end up depleting my savings only to crawl back to corporate life, humbled and desperate? Mike was my rock during this period, reminding me why I had left, and helping me focus on the future rather than second-guessing the past. You made the right decision, he would say whenever he caught me spiraling. Now prove to yourself it was the right one by making it successful. 10 days after my departure, I received an unexpected call from Margaret Jackson, Horizon Media CEO. Rachel, she began without preamble, the board has reviewed your documentation and conducted interviews with several team members. We would like to meet with you to discuss the situation. I felt a flutter of anxiety. I appreciate the call, Margaret, but I have moved on from Horizon. I am not interested in participating in an internal investigation at this point. This is not just about an investigation, she replied. We would like to discuss your potential return to the company, with some significant adjustments to your position and compensation. The offer caught me off guard. I had never expected Horizon to acknowledge the situation, let alone attempt to rectify it. I am available tomorrow afternoon, I heard myself say. The Horizon Media boardroom felt simultaneously familiar and foreign as I took a seat across from Margaret, the head of HR, and 2 board members. David was conspicuously absent. First, I want to extend our sincere apologies, Margaret began. The evidence you provided combined with our internal investigation has revealed serious lapses in management judgment and oversight. The head of HR nodded gravely. We have taken immediate action. Brian Thompson has been demoted and placed on probation. David Wilson has been removed as department head and reassigned to our Cleveland office. I absorbed this information, feeling a complex mix of vindication and lingering frustration that it had required my resignation to prompt these changes. We would like to offer you the senior marketing director position, Margaret continued, with a substantial increase in salary and a seat on the executive committee. Your work has clearly been instrumental to our success, and we want to properly recognize that contribution moving forward. Part of me was tempted. The position I had worked toward for years was finally being offered, along with the respect I had wanted, but something had deeply changed inside me. The past weeks of freedom, despite their problems, had sparked a hunger for something more than even the most famous corporate title could give. I thank you for the offer, I said softly. Truly, but I have decided to start my own marketing business. I believe it is where my skills and values will be best used. Margaret looked truly sad. Is there anything we could offer that would change your mind? We are ready to be quite open. I shook my head. My decision is not about pay or title. It is about making a place where honesty and greatness are naturally important, not just when easy. As I left the Horizon building for what I knew would be the last time, I felt an extreme sense of ending. The company had accepted the wrong, but more importantly, I had accepted my own value. The following weeks were a rush of work as I started Matthew's marketing consultancy. I got a small office space in a shared building, made professional branding, and began talking to people. Sandra proved very helpful, linking me with possible clients and giving advice on running an independent business. The Marketing Excellence Awards event gave an unexpected turning point. As Sandra's guest, I found myself around industry leaders, curious about my new business. By the end of the night, I had 3 possible client meetings planned, and an invitation to speak at a digital marketing event. The first 6 months were tight. I took on smaller jobs than I had at Horizon, working longer hours for less quick money, but each job added to my past work and name. Each happy client brought new ones and more chances. A big turning point came when Nutrilife's marketing head, who had moved to a bigger company, called me directly. "I always knew you were the smart one behind our work," she said. "When I heard you had started your own agency, I right away thought of you for our new product start." That job led to more, and slowly Matthew's marketing consultancy started doing well. I hired my first worker after 8 months, a smart new graduate who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. By the 1-year mark of leaving, I had a team of 4 and a client list that had 2 companies bigger than any I had worked with at Horizon. 18 months later, I went to an industry event where I suddenly met Brian. He looked less strong, his old bold style replaced by a more quiet way. "Rachel," he said uncomfortably when we stood alone at the coffee area. "I heard your company is doing well." "It is," I said, feeling no hate or joy at his uneasy moment. "How are things at Horizon?" "Different," he said after a short break. "David is gone for good. The new team head is big on papers and fair credit for work." He gave a smile that did not look real. "I now do my own talks." I nodded, not sure what to say. In the end, I just wished him well and walked away, knowing his view, his job, his praise no longer mattered to me. Later that day, I got a text from Thomas, who still worked at Horizon. Guess who just became the youngest vice president in company history? Jessica Parker. "The new bosses now really see talent. Your leaving changed everything." The fact that my actions made good change beyond just me was deeply rewarding. By not accepting the wrong, I had by chance opened the door for others to be seen for their work, not just office games. As my business kept growing, I was often asked by young people for advice. They asked about marketing tips, of course, but more often they wanted help on dealing with job problems like mine. I always say the same key ideas: write down everything, know your value, and sometimes the bravest move is leaving a place that does not see your worth. The most surprising part of my story was not the business success or name. It was how I changed. The woman who once judged herself by others' views and job rank had become someone who trusted her own choices and saw honesty as more important than moving up. My bond with Mike got stronger too. The shared path of building my business showed how right we were for each other in ways our old life never had. When he asked me to marry 6 months later, it felt like the natural next step in a bond that had grown beyond old limits. Today, as I talk to new people for our growing team, I often see in them the same hunger for praise and success that once drove me. I make sure to clearly thank them for their work, to build a place where effort is seen and success is always shared. The last person I interviewed reminded me a lot of myself 3 years ago, full of energy, smart, maybe too eager to prove worth by giving too much. "What is the most important thing you want in a job?" I asked her. She thought about it. "Chance to grow," she said as expected. I smiled. "Let me tell you why I think honesty matters just as much," I began, sharing a careful version of my story. "Your talent should be seen, never accept less." The road from that painful job moment to running my own agency taught me the most valuable thing of my work life. Real success is not about job titles or money, but about the strength to stand for your value and the honesty to build the space you deserve, not just accept what is given. Have you ever had to make a hard choice to leave a job that did not see your value? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more real stories from the working world. Remember, sometimes the boldest thing you can do is walk away and build something better. Thank you for watching, and may you always know your real value is not to be lowered.